All right, folks, welcome to this AWS course. My name is Savitra Sirohi. I'll be your instructor. So we'll start in at the scheduled time, which is 2 minutes away, right? In the meantime, I hope you can see my screen and I hope you can hear me properly. If not, please let me know. All right. Otherwise, see you soon in a couple of minutes. All right. Now, once again, if you can't see my screen, because sometimes what happens is the webinar tool does not work well with Chrome, which is my browser. So if you can't see my screen, please let me know. You can use the questions panel, question section in your webinar panel. All right. Okay. So first of all, thank you for signing up for this course. Right. We appreciate your business. This is, of course, a course on Amazon Web Services, right? And we are going to prepare you to become a AWS solutions architect, right? So the role is solutions architect, and you might be doing this course because you want to use AWS in your work, right? Or you might be preparing for the AWS certification examination, right? So that's what this course is all about. All right. Now, let me just start off by telling you a bit about the course. How this works. What is the course structure? What is the curriculum that we have for you, right? And then we'll get started with today's agenda. All right. So first of all, the way this works is, the instructors are have experience using the technology. So in my case, for example, right, I've been using AWS since 2008, right? So I've used AWS for as the technology backend for a software as a service business. I've also used it in a database environment, a search engine environment for many years. Right, I've performed roles on the technology side and also on the business side, on the sales side, using AWS. On the trading side as well, I've done many batches with Edureka for both solutions architects and developers. Right, so that's one. Now, the second thing about this course is this is an interactive session. Right, so I'm going to show you some slides, and I'm going to also show you lots of demonstrations during our sessions, and also there's lots of opportunities for you to ask questions. Right now, unfortunately, given the state of internet connections, we can't have you on. We can't have your audio turned on. Right, so that's unfortunately that's what we have to do. But still, we'll have lots of interaction. You can use the questions section of your webinar panel. And what I like to do also is to have a shared Google document where you enter your questions and where I can also provide you answers in a written way. Right, and so that will be another mechanism that we'll be using during this course. Right, now we'll have a course project. Right, there'll be some assignments for you, a course project, and we'll give you support. We'll give you technical support. Right, so you might be practicing something at home and you might get stuck at some point. So you'll have the opportunity to contact support, who will help you, and support will get in touch with me if required to help you along. All right. So these are some of the things that we're doing in this course. The class is recorded as well. So the voice, the visuals that you're seeing will all be recorded, and they'll be recording uploaded on the learning management system a few hours after each session. Right. So you can refer to the recording later. And sometimes you may miss the class, right? So you may want to look at the recording of the class that you have missed, right? There's also quizzes and assignments and labs, step-by-step guides. All these things are available in the learning management system as well, right? So I hope all of you have the URL to the learning management system handy. I hope all of you have received the login credentials, right? So let me, in fact, before we go any further, let me just show you the learning management system as well, right? So so this is my browser, and this is how you go to the LMS, right? Just go to edureka.co, and you have to log in. And once you log in, you should be able to go to your courses. This is our course, AWS Architect Training. And if you click on this, on the Go to Course button, you'll find the course content in this fashion, right? So this is organized by module. We have 10 modules, and under each module, you'll find the presentation that I'll be covering, and there's some additional stuff. For example, a quiz that you can try. There are some labs. These are more like hands-on, step-by-step guides, right? So you can look at these material on the LMS, right? And the video recording of the class will also be available on this in the same place. So the video recording of module 1 will be available under module 1 a few hours after the session is concluded. All right. So that's what that's how the LMS works. All right. Now, all right. Okay, and then there's a project, right? We spoke about a capstone project, which is basically we'll set up a web application, right? So this will be a web application set up on EC2 instances. We'll have a database on RDS. The servers will be in a virtual private cloud, right? And we'll also use auto scaling and load balancing, so you have a highly available, scalable infrastructure, right? So that will be your capstone project, for which we'll give you technical support as well, right? And of course, there's a verifiable certificate available once you complete this course. All right, now talking about the course itself, right? What are we going to learn in each of these sessions? So as you know, this is a course which has 10 modules, right? And we do this on a weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, 3 hours each day, right? So that's a total of 30 hours that we'll be spending in class together, right? And the way this is organized is the course structure closely follows the requirements of the Solutions Architect certification examination, right? So we've looked closely at the blueprint of that AWS exam, and the course structure is built around that, right? So what we'll do specifically is today we'll do a quick introduction on cloud computing and AWS, right? And we'll also get started with EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute, which is one of the many services that are available from AWS, right? So EC2s are essentially, EC2 is a virtual server service, right? And this is something that you have to, it's the most commonly used service, widely used, and it's probably something that you should get started with, right? So EC2 should be the first service that you learn, and that's what we will do today and mainly tomorrow, right? So tomorrow we'll do hands-on work on EC2. Today we'll get introduced to EC2 as well. All right. Okay, so that'll be module 2, EC2, and then in modules 3 we will look at some storage services, right? EC2 is a compute service, right? So compute is one category of services within AWS, and there are others as well. And in module 3 we'll look at storage services, which is another category, right? So there could be we could talk about EBS, Elastic Block Store. We'll talk about S3, simple storage service. So there's a bunch of storage services that we need to look at, right? So compute, storage, these are basic infrastructural elements, right? So we'll look at these two in modules 2 and 3. In 4, we'll look at some networking services, mainly virtual private cloud, right? So this is, this is a networking service in that it has it gives you full control over your network, the IP addresses that you need to have, routing, network routing that you need to have. All those things can be customized. VPCs are also more secure than setting up infrastructure outside VPCs, right? So VPCs are also becoming default. They are becoming the default way of setting up infrastructure. So it's an important topic. Right? But basically, what we're doing here is you have compute in module 2, you have storage services in module 3, and you have network services in module 4. Right? So these are basic infrastructural elements. And then in module 5, we'll look at some database services. Right? So you have relational database services, you have NoSQL database services, you have caching, you have other types of databases as well. right? So that's module 5. In module 6, we will look at high availability and scalability, right? And also maybe fault tolerance. So AWS and especially EC2 has multiple ways in which you can set up highly available, highly scalable infrastructure, and we'll look at two specific features of EC2. One is elastic load balancers, and the second one is auto scaling groups. Right. So this is a very popular topic, very interesting topic as well. And for a solutions architect, one of the key jobs of a solutions architect is to architect something which is highly available and scalable and fault tolerant. Right. So this is an important module. Right. Okay. Now, from module 7 onwards, we'll start looking at some other services. AWS, initially started out as an infrastructure as a service company, but now they have, expanded their suite of services to include platforms, to include some management tools, to include some deployment tools. Right. So there's a whole bunch of additional services that are now available, and a solutions architect, especially, right. I wouldn't say the same thing to a developer, right? Or I wouldn't say the same thing to a system administrator, but I would say this to a solutions architect, that you need to know enough about many of these services, right? You need to have width in your knowledge so that you are able to pick the right service for the problem that you are solving, right? So we need to look at many other services, even though you may not use them too much, or maybe you may not use them right away, but you need to know enough. Right? So we look at some management tools, we look at some application services, we look at some deployment services. We'll also look at security, right? Especially for production environments, you need to have, you need to know security services, for example, identity and access management, right? So essentially, we are basically starting out with some of the core services, some of the basic services on the infrastructure side: compute, storage, networking, databases, right? Then we are looking at production environments, things like auto scaling, and then we are looking at management, deployment, security, right? So to round out the full set of services that are available in AWS. All right. So that's how we are going to do this course. All right. Okay. So let me get started, right? Let me get started with today's objectives, and before that, also let me share with you one Google document, right? So what I like to do in my classes is any questions that you have, my request to you is to enter your questions in this shared document, right? Because what happens then is everybody can see your question, right? And everybody can see the responses as well. And as we move forward in this course, right, we have a set of questions and answers, right? And then by the end of this course, you have a fantastic document with all these questions and answers, right? So you get a very good resource at the end of this course, right? So that's why I request you to use this document. Let me share a link. All right, so let me give you edit rights as well, and I'm going to share this link with you, and we'll use this. All right. Okay. Can I just request one of you to send me a message on the webinar panel, and I can then. All right, Sushmita, I have your message. All right. So I'm going to reply to Sushmita here, and I'm going to send this. I'm going to send this link to you folks. Right. I hope. All of you can click on that, right? You can enter this document right away, and you can see if you are able to edit this document, right? So basically, just enter your name and your question, and then we'll discuss. I'll stop my presentation from time to time, and I'll look at your questions and I'll respond, right? And you can also enter questions in this document off class, right? So maybe at home you're reading something. Maybe you're practicing something, you have some questions in mind, please enter them here, and we'll cover them at some point, right? So what I do often is I respond to most of the questions during the class, and in addition to responding over audio, I also write a small answer, right? So that you have an answer to review at a later stage as well. Sometimes there are too many questions, so then what I do is I respond to those questions after the class, right? So please feel free there's no limit to the number of questions you can ask, right? Please make sure that you get all your questions answered, right? That's what you should do. All right. Okay. If anybody is not able to access this document, please let me know, right? So we'll see what to do. And sometimes what happens is people are on tablets. Sometimes they are driving. They're just listening into the class, and they're not able to enter the question in this document, right? If that's the case, what you can do is send me the question using the question section in the webinar panel, and I will copy those your questions into this document. All right. So that's how we'll do this. All right. Now let me go ahead with today's agenda. All right. So today, what we're going to look at is we'll talk a little bit about cloud computing first, right? Because I want to make sure that you understand what cloud computing is, and especially how is it different from traditional server rooms, traditional data centers, right? And then we'll get into AWS, right? Our objective is to get started with AWS. Our objective is to start using these AWS services. Now, remember, this is a skill, right? It's not enough to read about these things or watch some videos. You have to use AWS, right? So that's my objective, especially for this week. My objective is to get you started with AWS, right? So how do we create an account? How do we start up a server? How do we how do we connect to the servers? How do we install an application? That's the kind of things we want to do by the end of this week. All right. So so what we're going to talk about AWS today is we'll talk about the global infrastructure, right? So AWS is mainly an infrastructure service. So we need to understand how the infrastructure is set up around the world, right? And within the infrastructure, there are multiple regions. These are basically large data centers, and you need to choose one region or one or more regions for your applications, right? That's a very important decision. We need to see how do we make that decision, right? Okay, we'll start talking about EC2. Right? EC2 is the most commonly used, the most probably the first service you will use, because these are basically virtual servers, right? And to run any kind of application, you need servers. So so EC2 is something that everybody starts with. You should do the same, right? And we'll start with understanding EC2. Now within EC2, there's many instance types. These are basically types of virtual servers, right? These could be compute optimized servers. These could be general purpose servers. There are many different sizes, from nano servers to 10x large servers. So you need to understand what these instance types are, which instance type is best for your application, right? So we need to see how to select an instance type as well. And we'll also talk about purchasing options, right? How do you buy these services, especially how do you buy EC2 instances, right? So there are multiple ways of purchasing. For example, you may buy reserved instances, which are very cheap, right? You can save a lot of money when you buy reserved instances, but reserved instances should be bought only when you have a need for a server for the long term, right? If you need servers for the short term, then you need to buy on-demand instances, right? So cost is a very important aspect of cloud computing, because the pricing model, the costing, the billing happens in ways which are very different from traditional purchases, right? So in the past, or even now, when you have to buy a server, you normally pay upfront, right? Whereas in cloud computing, the bill is more like your mobile phone bill or your electricity bill, where you get a bill based on usage, right? So so what happens is in cloud computing, the finance department or your accounting department does not play as much of a role, and the technology folks have to worry about cost as well, because the way you use cloud computing determines the bill, right? So the cost aspect becomes important for solutions architects and other types of people, other types of technology people to look at as well, right? So this is broadly the objective. Basically, what is AWS? How is the infrastructure organized? What are the various services it has? What are the regions? How do we select a region? And then within those regions, we need to set up EC2 instances. So, what are the instance types available? How do I select the instance type, and then how do I buy these instances, right? How can I buy these instances, right? So that's broadly the objective. Basically, we'll get you started with EC2 a little bit today, right? And then tomorrow we'll do some hands-on work. We'll see some demonstrations so that by the end of tomorrow, you should be in a position to start your servers, to connect to them, set up your applications. All right. Okay. So that's the objective for today. All right. All right. Now, before we do that, right? Before we get into AWS, let's understand cloud computing a little bit, right? We'll also look at the AWS certifications that are available, and also we'll talk a little bit about the solutions architect role, right? What are the expectations from this role? The same expectations are what you'll be tested on in the AWS certification exam as well, right? So let's talk about this first. Okay, so cloud computing. First of all, just a very quick introduction. We don't want to discuss the theories and the concepts around cloud computing too much. Our job is to look at AWS, right? But I just want to make sure that you have some understanding of what cloud computing is. All right. So cloud computing, this is pretty, it's now an established thing, right? It's no longer a fad, right? It's been close to 10 years since cloud computing first came on the scene, right? But what it is basically it's a model where you have a shared pool of resources. These are servers, storage, networking, other kinds of services, and you can basically on demand, right? You can basically whenever you need a server, whenever you need some storage, you can request for that, and you will get those resources right away. Right, you'll get those resources right away. So it's basically on-demand access to a shared pool of computing resources. Right, in a way, it's very much like Uber car sharing. Right, so in fact, Uber is new. Cloud computing is older, but it's the same idea. Right, in Uber, for example, the question they're asking is, why do you need to own a car? Right, why do you need to own a car? The car that you own is idle 99% of the time, right? It's much cheaper if you can rent a car, right? Especially if it's very convenient, right? If you can just with a few clicks on your mobile phone application, request a car, and the car arrives within 5 minutes, right, or less, then there's no reason really to own a car, right? If you do a cost comparison between owning a car, where you have to pay something upfront, you have to take care of insurance, you have to do annual, you have to do multiple car services, the servicing of the car, right? You have to take care of fuel. So there are so many costs, direct and indirect. And if you were to really sit down with a calculator, you probably figure out that for many people, a service like Uber makes a lot of sense. Right? So it's exactly the same thing with cloud computing, in that the question AWS and other cloud vendors are asking is, why do you need to have your own data center, right? Why do you need to have your own servers? What we're going to do is we'll create a gigantic pool of these servers and storage and networking resources, and then we will make it very easy for you to rent, right, whatever you need. And we'll make it very convenient for you, right? So with just a few clicks of your mouse, you can get whatever you need. If you need 10 servers, you can get 10 servers, right? If you need to store 10 terabytes of data, we'll give you that, right? And then also, it's very convenient in the sense, if you don't need something, right, you can terminate those resources as well, right? So if you need, for example, I do some training, maybe I need some. I'm training 10 people on Linux. I need 10 Linux servers for a couple of hours, right? So I just, launch 10 Linux servers, and then 2 hours later, once my training class is finished, I just terminate those 10 servers, right? So it's easy to, get stuff. It's easy to terminate, which means you give away the stuff back into the pool, right? It's easy to change. I can easily go from 10 servers to 100 servers, right? It's very, very convenient. And basically, that's what cloud computing is, right? It's very, very compelling. It's very compelling. It is so convenient, it works so well, and it's much cheaper. It's so flexible, right? So that's what cloud computing is. All right. Okay. there are many cloud computing vendors now. So this is, this is an industry which is still evolving. It's growing very rapidly, and there are different types of players doing different things in the space. Amazon Web Services is a leader in one category, right? It's a leader in the infrastructure space, but there are cloud computing is broader than infrastructure alone. So there are software as a service companies, there are platforms as a service companies, there are management tools, all kinds of things, right? There are software which are hybrid cloud providers. There are software which you can use to create your own cloud service, right? So there's a whole bunch of products, a whole bunch of companies out there, and all these companies form the cloud computing industry today, right? So you can see here some of the players. AWS is there, and then Windows, Azure, right, from Microsoft is doing very well. Google made a move. It didn't come off really well. They have this Google App Engine. Rather, they had this Google App Engine, and now they're shifting strategies, right? So their App Engine didn't really take off, but they are still in the space, and you can expect them to make some big moves, right? And then there's DigitalOcean, which is a cloud provider focused on developers, right? Maybe Azure and AWS is focused on the enterprise market. DigitalOcean is focused on developers. There's OpenStack, which you can use to create your own private cloud, right? So bunch of companies. It's a very big space now. Lots and lots of companies. All right. Now AWS, right, is the clear leader in one space, right? So cloud computing is a very big industry, and within that industry, there's infrastructure as a service is one sector in the cloud computing industry, and in that sector, AWS is the clear leader, right? And they're the clear leader because they started out early. They started first, right? And this is basically a service from Amazon.com, right? Which was the pioneering internet company, internet commerce company, pioneering internet service in the US, and they were the first ones, I guess, to experience really high internet scale transaction volumes, a very high number of users, right? So they had to be very good with technology, right? And what they learned from Amazon.com's experiences, right? The technology that they built as part of building Amazon.com is what is now available as AWS, right? So they got started early because of their unique and early experience with internet scale business, and then after that, once they launched, they have executed really well, right? So they have a very clear vision, and they have very good execution capabilities. So that's why they are in the lead, right? But there are other formidable players, right? All these US companies, Microsoft, Google, IBM, all of these are still in the mix, right? And Azure is doing very well, and IBM has bought a company called SoftLayer. They'll probably be strong in the enterprise market, and Google, came out with a platform, but I think now they're shifting strategies, and probably you can expect Google to play a major role as well, right? So there are formidable competitors, but right now AWS is clearly in the lead, right? In fact, this is one way of looking at things. 60% are using AWS, right? 60% are using AWS. But if you look at the revenues, right? I heard this recently, and what they said is AWS revenues are 10 times the revenues of all other players put together, right? So that's how big AWS is, and the outlook, right? Since you're looking to invest your time into this technology, my view is that the outlook is good because they have a very strong track record of good execution, right? So I think this is a good bet, right? You're placing a good bet if you're going with AWS. All right. Okay. So that's a little bit of introduction, to the industry. All right, folks. My apologies. Sometimes sometimes the Chrome browser doesn't work very well with the GoToMeeting tool here. All right. So now let's also, before we get started with today's agenda, let's also talk about certifications, because some of you at least, right, will be very interested in this aspect. So what we have is AWS now has three tracks, right? So you have the architecture track, which is solutions architect track. There's a developer track, and there's also an operations track, right? So we are looking at the architecture solutions architect track in this particular course here, right? And there are two steps. There are two levels. One is the associate level, and then there's also the professional level, right? So you can first you'll have to go for this certification, and once you've had this, you can then aspire to go for the professional certification as well, right? Now I just want to set expectations here, right? Now what my recommendation to you is you need to use AWS in a significant way, right, in your day-to-day projects, and you should use it for maybe 18 months or more, right? 18 months or more is what you should use AWS for, and then try and take this exam, right? Is what I recommend, right? Now you may be in a situation where you need to take the exam earlier, right? So I'm not going to sort of comment on that, but the best way to do this is to take the exam after you have used it, after you've used AWS for a long time, right? Because then what happens is it becomes very easy, right? You take the exam as to test your, just to validate what you already know, right? And you know AWS really well if you actually use it, right? So it's not enough to just read about it. The exam is not easy, right? It's very well designed, right? The exams are designed very carefully, and it's designed to separate the people who have cursory knowledge, right? If you just read about AWS, the exam is designed to separate such people from people who have actually used it for a long time, right? So the exam is difficult, and you should use AWS a lot more. All right. So 18 months, and then maybe you can go for the associate level exam, and then maybe 18 more months, right? Or maybe 2 more years, and then you can go for the professional exam, right? That's the kind of time frames that you must have in your mind. All right. Okay. All right. So this is on the certification. All right. Now the role, right? A lot of people have questions on what is the solutions architect role, right? What are we expected to do, and whatever the expectations, the same things are tested in the exam, right? So it's actually the same thing. Now, if you look at the exam blueprint, it will talk about these things that you see on the slide, right? One is you should be able to design scalable, highly available, fault-tolerant systems, right? This is number one objective, and why this is these we all use these services now, internet services, Facebook, Gmail, etc., right? And these folks have done such a good job, right? Do you remember Facebook being down ever, right? Do you remember Gmail or Google being slow, right? No, because they've done a fantastic job, these consumer services. And what has happened is everybody uses these services, so everybody knows what a good application is like, right? So what has happened is everybody has to up their game, right? We all need to create applications which are highly available, highly scalable, and fault tolerant, right? Because if your site is down or if it's slow, then there's a very big negative impact on your brand, right? These are becoming hygiene standards, right? You need to, at the very minimum, have applications which are always up and they're always fast, right? So this is a very important topic. All right. Another role for a solutions architect is migrations, right? Because even though cloud has been around for a long time now, there are many companies in the world who still need to move to the cloud, right? And it's not easy for many people to move to the cloud because of their current technology landscape, right? It may be too complex. There may be too many interdependencies, right? And also, you often don't know how to migrate, right? We're not talking about a single application, single web application, right? Some migrations can be trivial, but often, you need to really think about, you really need to prepare well for migrations. And before you prepare, you need to really architect, right? You need to design and architect your migration process. So, for example, where will my database go, right? If I have an Oracle database, what about licensing? What about security? Right? Will I use EC2 instances, or will I use RDS database service? Right? What about storage? Will I use SSD devices on the cloud? Will I use some other type of storage volumes? Right? So there's a bunch of things to think about. Right? It's not as easy as it may seem initially. Right? So migrations is an important topic because lots of people still need to move to the cloud. All right. Okay. And then other stuff like you need to know enough about various services that are available so that you can select. Right. You must be able to select what service to use for what. Right. So especially say migration, you may have a heterogeneous technology landscape. Right. You may have Windows servers, you may have Linux servers, you may have Unix, you may have different types of storage devices. So what goes where? Right. What will what service on cloud maps to what component that I have in my current landscape, right? Or you may be designing something new, right? So you may need something really, maybe you need a really fast database. So then you need to know, okay, do I use relational database service, or do I use DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL service, right? Should I use Elasticache, which is a caching service, right? So you need to know enough about the various services that are available now, and so that you can select the right service for the right problem, right? So that's another important role of a solutions architect, right? Okay, you also need to know a lot about the best practices, right? Architectural best practices, because there are many services. These things are much better than what was available before, right? But you still need to implement these things properly, right? There are indeed right ways of doing things, and there are wrong ways of doing things, right? And a lot of it you learn through experience, but there's a lot of knowledge available. People have done this for a long time now. There are a lot of white papers, for example, written by AWS employees, right? So AWS, people who are working on the product, or there are people who work with customers, right? So these people, have seen what people do well, what mistakes they make, and there's a bunch of white papers that are available that talk about best practices, right? So security best practices, EC2 best practices, migration best practices, right? So there are a bunch of topics. And there's lots of knowledge available, and you'll also have to create your own best practices based on your own experiences, right? So this is something that you need to do as well as a solutions architect. All right, and lastly, right, cost. As I mentioned earlier, right, in the past, what used to happen was the buying process used to be different, in that, let's say if you needed some servers, let's say you needed some blade servers or something like that. So what you would do is you would put out a specification, you would put out a request for proposals. Vendors would send you their quotations. You would do some comparison, you would do some negotiation, and you would place an order. And when you place the order, you would sign a check, right? So thousands of dollars, here's the check, and then the order is placed, and then the stuff would come into your company maybe a few weeks later, right? That used to be the process. It was very simple because you had some quotations, you do some comparison, and then you place an order, right? So your finance department or your business people would be involved in it. And it was very, very simple. It was just a single price. Usually, those who quote less, right? Right. That's how it was, a very simple process of managing the costs. Now, with cloud, what happens is the whole model is different, in that there is usually no upfront payment, right? There's no upfront payment, although in some cases you can. But what happens is it depends on your usage. So and not just how much you use, but it depends on what you use and how you use things, right? And often things are not in your control. For example, you don't control how much data is used over the network by your users, right? So some things are under your control, some things are not, right? And at the end of the month, you get a bill based on what you have used, right? So your cost per month can vary, right? And also there are often many ways of optimizing the cost, right? So you can make some decisions to cut down the cost based on your actual bills that you're seeing. So and what happens is all these decisions about how to use, what to use, how much to use cannot be made by the business side, right? It cannot be made by your accounting department or your finance department, because they will have no clue, right, about what's going on with the infrastructure, right? So for the first time, in my view, right, in the cloud computing world, the cost side becomes an important part of what the technology folks need to do, right? So this is a very important topic. All right. So this is, basically broadly the expectations from a solutions architect. All right. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is let me stop here. Right. Let me stop here because we've talked about the course. We've talked about the certifications. We've talked about the expectations from a solutions architect. Let me stop here. Maybe you guys have some questions right at this point. Let's maybe do a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll proceed with the introduction to AWS. All right. Now, some of you may have joined a bit late, so let me just, for their benefit, let me just tell you that the questions and answers we'll do using this shared document, right? So we can't have you on your audio on because it doesn't work well from experience. So the best way, I think, is to use this sheet, right? So if you don't have the sheet, if you don't have the link to the sheet, please let me know, and I can send it to you. In fact, let me send it to you once again. In any case, right? So please click on the link, and you should be able to edit this document. You can enter your questions here. All right. So while you're writing your questions, let me start answering. Ratish, your question is, if we launch a Windows server, do I need to ensure that I have the appropriate OS license already in place, or is that covered by Amazon when I launch an instance? Yeah, it's a good question, right? It's a good question, and the answer is you can do both, right? You can do both. So basically, by default, what happens is you pay an hourly rate for an EC2 instance, right? So it could be, say, I don't know, 3 cents per hour or something like that. So this hourly rate will include the cost of the infrastructure, right? Which is, the server cost and the networking cost and the power and stuff like that. And it will also include the software cost, which in this case, the cost of Windows OS software, right? So this is the normal way in which you use it. Now you may say, hey, I already have licenses, right? So if you already have Windows licenses, then you can get them transferred, right? You can get them transferred to AWS, right? So this, you have to speak to AWS, right? There's a little bit of interaction required to make this all possible, right? There may be some complications. I'm not very familiar with the process, but this is possible as well. This is possible for many commercial products, say Oracle databases, etc. as well, right? And this is called I think, bring your own licenses, BYOL, right? So both are possible. All right. Okay. Tony, your question is, where does CloudFormation fit in the services? Yeah. So this is, CloudFormation, by the way, for the benefit of others, right, is a service where what you do is you can create a template, right? You create a template of your infrastructure, right? So this could include many different services. For example, it could include firewalls, networks, virtual EC2 instances, RDS instances, right? So whatever your stack is, right, you can create a template out of this, and then using the template, you can create or recreate your stack many times over, right? So once you have a template, you can create your stack multiple times, right? You can create a DR environment, you can create a test environment, you can create a production environment. So all those things can be done once you have a template, right? So this is a service which basically makes it very simple to provision and deploy, right? So so that's what it does, and you can classify this. So CloudFormation, because of what it does, can be classified as a management tool, right, or a deployment tool, right? So this would come under that kind of service. All right, folks. So let me know if you have any questions on what we've discussed so far, right? And after this, I'll get started with the rest of the agenda. All right. Okay. So let me go ahead. Right. Let me go ahead. All right. So there's one question here from Sanjay. Let me paste this here. And okay. So the question is, how is it different from Docker? Right. So I guess what you're referring to is how is AWS different from Docker? Right. So Docker is a kind of virtualization. Right. It's a kind of a virtualization. Or a different kind of virtualization, right? It's a basically all the apps or containers share the OS, right? It does OS emulation rather than hardware emulation, which traditional virtualization does, right? So Docker basically does OS virtualization or OS emulation rather, right? So it does OS emulation rather than hardware emulation. Instead of hardware emulation, which is what traditional virtualization does, right? So it's a virtualization technology, and cloud is and AWS is much bigger than that, right? So Docker is like a very small bit, right? It's a small technology which does virtualization in a new way. Right, and remember, before cloud there was virtualization, right? So VMware at one point was one of the most valuable companies in the world because they came out with a way of reusing the same hardware for different stacks, right? So before cloud there was virtualization, and even after cloud there is Docker, which is another form of virtualization, right? But it only what Docker does is it lets you create many applications in a single server, right? But cloud is much more than that, because cloud gives you servers. It also gives you Docker containers, by the way, right? Within AWS, you have a Docker service. So cloud gives you compute infrastructure, it gives you storage, it gives you networking, it gives you application services, management tools, lots of things, right? And Docker is a very small bit in this whole set of technologies, right? So cloud and AWS, right? Cloud and AWS is much bigger, right? Much bigger because it gives you compute services, storage services, network services, application services, etc. Right? Lots of tools, etc. And Docker is just a virtualization technology. Right? And by the way, AWS also has a Docker service, so you can set up Docker containers in AWS. All right, folks. So let me move forward here. Okay. So now let's look at AWS a little bit, right? Before we get into the infrastructure, let's understand AWS a little bit more. And I want to talk to you about the various AWS services that are available, right? So so this slide is pretty good. It summarizes the various services that are available, right? So you have a compute a category. This is a category, right? And then under this category, you have multiple services, right? And then you have storage category, you have networking, databases, and then other stuff, right? Management, application services, etc. Right? So these are the various categories. You can see compute, storage, and networking are infrastructure, right? And then databases are slightly more than infrastructure. You can call database services as platforms. They're platforms as a service, in the sense you don't just get the the raw infrastructure in terms of CPUs and RAM and storage space, but you get some additional automation as well, right? So for example, with database services, you get things like automated backup, automatic replication and failover, right? Automatic patch updates. So all these things can be done in these database services, right? So these are more like platforms, something more than infrastructure, right? Infrastructure plus something more, right? So that's what these categories are, right? So compute, storage, database, networking, these things will help you set up your application, right? Whatever your application is, Java, PHP, .NET, right? Whatever your applications are, you can use these things to set up your application, right? And most of these things will be familiar to you, right? Especially compute, storage, and databases, right? We all know Oracle databases. We all know MySQL databases. We know application servers, web servers like Apache, right? So it's easy. It's pretty easy to use these services, right, to do the things that we already do, right? But in addition to these things, we also have some additional stuff. For example, management tools, right? Management tools. So AWS will give you, they need to give us everything we need to not only set up our applications, but also to manage the whole infrastructure, right? Otherwise, there are gaps left, and the service is less valuable, right? So they give you tools like CloudWatch, which is a way to monitor your infrastructure, right? What is up? What is down? Right? What is the CPU utilization of my servers? Right? What is the latency on my database? Right? So these kinds of things can be done using management tools, right? They also need to provide you with ways of managing the security of your infrastructure, right? Because security is very important in a cloud world, because this is the cloud, accessible over the internet, right? And anything accessible over the internet is vulnerable, right? More so than than stuff in your private network, because you can easily shut off your network, right? You can cut off your network from the internet. You can easily create a firewall which protects your network, right? But on the cloud, right, everything is available over the internet, so security is very important, right? So there's a bunch of services. You can consider VPCs as a security service, and there's also something called identity and access management, right? So this service is used to create your users, groups of users, permissions, right? Permissions can be controlled at a granular level, right? You can define who can do what actions on what resources, right? So that kind of thing is what you do with IAM, right? There's also something called application services, which is very interesting, by the way, and gives you a hint into AWS's strategy, right? So these application services are stuff that will help developers develop their applications faster, and also reduce the headache, the overhead of maintaining the application, right? So for example, many of the applications today send out emails, right? Almost all applications perhaps send out emails. So in the e-commerce world, when you place an order, you get an email confirming the order. Then you get another email once the once the goods are dispatched, right? You get another email once the goods are successfully delivered, right? You get another email when there's a refund, right? So lots of emails go out from different kinds of applications, and what happens is sending outgoing emails is actually a hard thing, right? It's a hard thing because managing the email infrastructure is hard, right? So you need to manage your SMTP servers. You need to make sure that they are secure, because spammers, right? Spammers want to hijack your email servers so that they can send out spam, right? And also, it's important to manage the reputation of your email servers, because what may happen is your email servers may be marked as spam, your emails, and then your emails start going into spam, even though they are legitimate emails, right? So there's lots of issues with email servers it's not really something that you need to build expertise in, because it's a generic service, right? So what AWS is saying is, look, just focus on your application, right? And we'll take care of the emails for you, right? So there's lots of services which are, you can see these are not infrastructure services, right? They are more application services, right? And AWS is trying to look at the various problems that technology people have, right? Developers, technology departments within enterprises, startup companies, product companies, and they're saying, look, we want to give you everything you need, right? So their goal, like Amazon.com, right? Amazon.com's goal is to give you everything you need, right? So all the products in the world they want to sell, right? Same way, AWS is trying to say that, look, we will give you everything you need, right? All the possible needs that you have, we are going to fulfill those, right? So that's why you can see they started out with basic infrastructure services, stuff like compute and storage, but they are now expanding into stuff that really is not infrastructure, right? They'll go into platforms, they'll go into software as a service as well, and many other things, right? By the way, this set of services that you see here is only a part of what is available, right? There are newer services available in the mobile space, in the analytics space, in the IoT space, right? So there's a bunch of other services that are now available as well, in addition to what you see on the slide, right? So that's how AWS, that's what AWS offers now, and this also should give you a direction, right? You can anticipate what kinds of things will come in the future. All right, now let's talk a bit about each category, right? So that you have some understanding at a high level of AWS, right? And then we'll get started with EC2 this week. All right, so the first category, right, is compute, and this is a basic infrastructural element, because you need you need compute capacity for any kind of application, for any kind of program, right? So what you have is first of all, EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute. These are virtual servers, right? Very much like the virtual machines that you may be using outside of the cloud, right? And it's so this is the most popular service here, right? But you also have some additional stuff here. For example, you have auto scaling. You have load balancers as well, right? So EC2, actually, you can say this is just virtual servers, right? Virtual servers have been around for a long time, before cloud computing as well. So what's so great, right? What's so great? And you would be right in thinking that, right? EC2 is actually not really a full cloud type of service, right? It's something which is a bridge between the old world and the cloud world, right? So it's not really cloud, but it's important because you need it, and also it's important because it's good to get started with something which is a little bit familiar, right? So you already know how virtual servers are, how to connect to them, right? So that's why it's a great place to start, right? But this is not really cloud, right? There's other stuff which is cloud-like, right? For example, look at auto scaling. Right? Auto scaling was not possible before, and the way this works is you can create a fleet of servers, right? You can create a group of servers, and this group of servers will expand based on load, right? If load is high, more servers will be added automatically, right? And then if the user load has gone away, right? You don't need that high number of servers. Then a number of servers will be terminated, right, automatically. So the number of servers will come down when the load is low, and it will increase when the load is high. And all of this can be done in a fully automated fashion, right? So this is cloud-like. It's elastic. Right? Cloud computing is about elasticity, right? And auto scaling is a feature of EC2 where you can have a completely elastic application server tier or a web server tier in your stack. Right? Okay, another service which is very much cloud-like, right? Unlike EC2, which is not cloud-like, is Lambda. This Lambda is a new service, right? It's very, very new, probably less than a year or so. And what it is it's a serverless computing, right? So there are no servers. You can run your programs without setting up a server, right? And the way it works is, let's say you have a small function, you trigger the function, the program or the function executes, and the program executes for a few milliseconds, right? Then you are billed only for those few milliseconds, right? So there are many applications where, which are infrequently run. They have very low usage, but to run them, you need a whole server running all the time, right? So there's a lot of wastage that happens. And with this kind of thing, what you can do is you are basically being billed for microseconds, right? Basically being billed for microseconds. So this can be like a real important service in the future, right? So this is how these are some of the cloud services, or rather compute services that are available. EC2, very important, very popular, has to be used, right? And also very familiar. So that's why we'll start with this next. All right, let's also look at storage and database a little bit, especially the key services that we'll talk about, right? So one of the key services is Amazon S3, right? Simple storage service. Simple storage service, very, very important, because this is a service which can be used to store any number of files, right? Any number of objects can be stored on this service. It could be video files, images. You can have your web pages, CSS files. You can store database backups. You can store log files, right? Anything can be stored on it, right? And there's no limit, right? There's no limit to how many items you can store, right? There is a limit on the maximum size of an object, which is 5 terabytes, right? Which is huge in itself. But there's no limit on the number of things that you upload on S3, right? So it is infinitely scalable, right? And the best thing is you only pay for what you use, right? If you upload just one file, a few bytes in size, right, your cost will be next to nothing. But if you upload maybe 100 million files, right, you can do that, right, and you'll be billed based on how much you use, right? So it's infinitely scalable, but at the same time you only pay for what you use, right? So that's great. And in addition, Amazon S3 has extremely high durability, right? So their durability SLA is 11 nines, which means 99.99, right? 99.99%, which means the chance of loss of data on S3 is zero, right? Virtually zero, right? There's no chance that data will be lost once you save it on S3, because it is designed that way, right? It's designed for 11 nines durability, right? And also its availability SLA is very high as well. So S3 is a service which is infinitely scalable, it's highly durable, and it is highly available, right? And also it is very, very cheap. It's extremely low cost compared to traditional storage mechanisms, right? So you can imagine it's a fantastic service. There are many use cases of S3, right? And we'll look at this in detail in the upcoming modules, right? Okay, but that's not it. There are more services. So for example, there's something called EBS, Elastic Block Store, EBS, right? And these are basically what are called block storage, right? These are block storage, very similar to hard disk volumes, right? But they're not really hard disks. They are network-based storage volumes, but these are block storage, and you can attach EBS volumes to your EC2 instances, right? And use them like hard disks, right? But they are much better than hard disks. So they are 20 times more reliable, right? You can have a size from 1 GB to 16 terabytes, right? You can attach multiple volumes to a server. You can do RAID configurations, right? So a bunch of stuff, bunch of things. These are very fast, right? EBS volumes are very fast. They boot really fast. There are multiple storage types available. Some for high input-output per second applications, like databases. Some for high throughput applications like Hadoop, right? So it's a very important service, right? It's used for storage with your servers, right? So S3 EBS, very important, right? But there's more. For example, there's Glacier, which is for long-term storage, right? Long-term storage. So highly durable like S3, but very, very cheap, very low cost, right? So this is 1/5 the cost of S3, right? And there are many use cases of Glacier. Whenever you want to store something for the long term, right? Databases, log files, some digital archival material, right? All those things can be stored in Glacier in an extremely low cost, right? So these are some options on the storage side. On the database side, you have 4 services, right? So you have a relational database, you have DynamoDB, Elasticache, Redshift. Now, RDS is the most commonly used because this is a service for relational databases, right? Relational databases are basically your, MySQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, right? These are standard databases which many of you will be familiar with, and you basically use RDS for these types of databases, right? Now, these databases can also be set up on EC2, right? These can be set up on EC2, but what RDS does for you is it does things like backup, software patches, replication, failover, read replicas, these kinds of things which are hard to do, right? If you've been on the database side, you'll know that managing replication, managing databases is a hard thing, right? It's a hard thing. So here, what AWS is saying is, look, we'll take care of the complexity, right? We'll take care of the complexity. You just focus on your application, right? Just focus on your business instead of doing this heavy lifting, right? So that's why RDS can make sense, right? If you install your databases on EC2, you got to take care of the complexity, right? Instead, you can use RDS, right? Okay, now you can also use DynamoDB, which is a managed service for NoSQL databases, right? Some of you may have heard of MongoDB. Some of you may have heard of Cassandra, right? So these are NoSQL technologies which have come up in the recent past, right? And NoSQL is better than relational databases for some types of applications, right? So very large data sets where very fast, low latency performance is required, right? Where you have your data structure changing all the time. So there are some areas where NoSQL is better, right? And that's why you have this DynamoDB service, which is a fully managed, right? Fully managed NoSQL service. You don't have to set up servers, right? You just specify the kind of capacity you need, and you can, in a very quick way, very simple way, start using NoSQL in your applications, right? So RDS also, like EC2, is a bit of a bridge between old and new.